Imagine a place where the collective knowledge of the ancient world is gathered under one roof. A place where ideas from Egypt, Greece, Persia, India, and lands beyond drift together like slow constellations, settling onto shelves of papyrus and into quiet human minds. Tonight, just for a while, we're stepping out of our own time and into that place, the legendary Library of Alexandria. Before we walk through its doors, a tiny favor. If these slow, sleepy journeys through history help you unwind, you can gently tap the like button so this video doesn't disappear into the YouTube fog. If you'd like more calm nights in ancient cities, you can subscribe and turn on the bell so new stories are waiting for you when your mind won't switch off. And if there's someone in your life who loves history but struggles to sleep, you can share this with them whenever you're ready, no rush at all. You don't arrive in Alexandria with a sudden jolt. There's no flash of light, no roaring portal, no grand announcement. One moment, you're simply lying where you are, listening to the sound of your own breathing. The next, you're standing on a stone terrace at the edge of an ancient city, and the first light of dawn is just beginning to taste the horizon. Alexandria is waking slowly. The sky above the Mediterranean is a deep, sleepy blue, fading to a pale band of gold where sea meets sky. A faint mist hangs over the harbor, blurring the outlines of ships at anchored tall masts, furled sails, ropes swaying gently with the water's movement. The distant sea carries a soft, steady hush, like the sound of a giant creature breathing in its sleep. The air is cool for now, with the kind of freshness that only exists in those few minutes before the sun fully claims the day. You can smell salt and damp stone, a hint of tar from ships, and somewhere far below, the first curls of smoke from morning fires. A gull calls once and then glides away, a pale shape cutting across the brightening sky. From where you stand, the city spreads out in layers. Closer to the shore, the harbor district is just beginning to stir, small figures moving on decks, a lantern being extinguished here, a rope hauled in there. Farther inland, streets lie quiet between pale buildings, their flat roofs stacked like steps leading toward the sky. And beyond them, rising gently but unmistakably from the fabric of the city, is the complex you've come for, the library. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't pierce the sky like a pyramid or loom like a fortress. Instead, it sits with a calm assurance, a cluster of graceful colonnades and broad, low halls, as if it knows that anyone who truly needs it will find their way there. From a distance, its pale stone glows softly in the early light. Tall columns form rhythmic lines, casting long, thin shadows across courtyards still wrapped in shade. A faint touch of sea breeze flows around its walls, carrying with it the promise of cool interiors and deep quiet. You take your first step toward it. The stone under your feet is smooth from countless sandals. You follow a gently descending path from the terrace into the waking city. The streets are wide here, planned and deliberate, laid out in straight lines that cross at measured angles. Alexandria is young compared to many ancient cities, and you can feel that youthful confidence in its grid, its symmetry, its careful design. As you walk, the city begins its own soft morning narration around you. A shutter creaks open above your head, letting in the first light to a high room. Somewhere to your left, a door groans softly as it's unbarred from within. You catch the low murmur of a voice calling to someone inside, a greeting, a reminder, a simple start to another ordinary day. Vendors are only just beginning to appear. One man sets down a woven basket of figs, their skins still cool with dawn. Another rolls up the cloth, covering a stall where clay lamps will soon be arranged in tidy rows. For now, they move without hurry. The real bustle will come later, when the sun is higher and the streets fill with footsteps. You move through it all as a quiet observer, light as a thought. No one stops you. No one questions your presence. In this small slip of time between night and day, you feel almost invisible, just another passing figure in a city that has seen thousands of such figures and will see thousands more. Gradually, the buildings around you grow broader, their facades more ornate. Columns appear more frequently, supporting shaded porticos where scholars and officials might stand later in the day, discussing matters of trade, governance, and philosophy. The faint scent of incense drifts from a nearby temple, mingling with the salt and smoke in the air. And then, after one last turn, you find yourself facing it fully. The library. Not just one building, you realize, but a complex wings and courtyards, reading halls and storage rooms, walkways connecting them all like carefully drawn lines on a scholar's diagram. The entrance before you is framed by tall columns. Their shafts rise smooth and pale, catching the new sun in soft bands of light. Above them, a frieze of carved patterns runs along the facade, no boastful scene of conquest, just measured, repeating designs, as if even the stone here prefers order and clarity. Wide steps lead up to the doorway. For a moment, you stand at the foot of those steps and simply breathe. You can feel the change in the air, even from outside. Beyond the threshold lies a different kind of atmosphere, cooler, calmer, dense with the presence of written words and long, careful thought. It's as if the building itself is taking a slow, deep breath, and you are standing right at the edge of its lungs. What if, just for one night, you could slip through time into the greatest library humanity has ever known? You let the question hang there, gentle and inviting. What discoveries wait inside? What forgotten maps, strange star charts, bold theories scratched in ink on papyrus? What voices, long silent in every other place, are still alive in the curves of letters resting in these halls? You take your first step upward. The stone of the stairs is cool under your feet, still untouched by the heat of the day. Each step feels deliberate, as if you are ascending not just into a building, but into a different way of being, slower, more attentive, quietly reverent. At the top, the entrance rises before you. Tall doors stand slightly ajar beneath the shade of the columns, inviting but not insistent, as if the library knows that those who truly need what it offers will find their way through without being called. You rest your hand lightly on the edge of the doorway. The wood is worn smooth where many hands have touched it before yours, scholars, scribes, travelers, translators, astronomers, poets, mathematicians, people whose names you know from history and countless others history has forgotten. For a heartbeat, you feel their presence layered here, one after another, like faint fingerprints left in the grain. Beyond the doors, a stillness waits. It is not empty silence. It is the kind of quiet that holds many soft sounds together. The whisper of footsteps on stone, the faint brush of papyrus, the almost inaudible exhale of someone reading under their breath. A quiet woven from concentration. You step through the threshold. The air changes at once. Cooler, yes, thick stone walls and shaded halls see to that, but also subtly scented. You catch the dry, textured smell of papyrus, the mineral tang of ink, the faint dust of scraped parchment and ground pigments. There is a sweetness, too, from oil in lamps and wax in seals, all settled into the fabric of the building over years. Light streams in from high openings and courtyards, never harsh, always softened by distance and stone. It falls in long, gentle beams across the floor, catching floating specks of dust and turning them into small drifting galaxies. You pause just inside the entrance and let your eyes adjust. Ahead, a broad main hall stretches out, lined with columns that march away into the distance like a quiet procession. Between them, alcoves open onto side rooms and reading spaces. Niches hold statues of muses and deities associated with learning, a reminder that, in this place, knowledge itself is almost a sacred presence. Everything is arranged with a patient symmetry. Shelves stand where they make the best use of light and shade. Walkways lead sensibly from one space to another. Nothing feels random or haphazard. The building is a map of the mind it serves, ordered, purposeful, built for exploration. You take a slow breath in. This is the beginning of your night in the Library of Alexandria. Outside, the city is fully waking now, the streets growing louder, the harbor busier, the sun climbing. But in here, time feels different. It stretches, soft and malleable, ready to hold as many hours of wandering as you need. You start forward, footsteps light on the cool stone. Somewhere deeper within these halls, scrolls rest in their niches, waiting. Somewhere, a scholar bends over a table, tracing lines on a map. Somewhere, faint voices murmur in Greek, Egyptian, and languages from lands further east, threads of sound weaving through the stacks. You have crossed the threshold. The city is behind you. The library is ahead. And the night of drifting through its quiet, boundless knowledge has only just begun. You move deeper into the main hall, following the steady rhythm of your own footsteps. Each step sounds soft against the stone, as if the floor has learned to absorb noise so that thoughts can move more easily here. Columns rise on either side of you. Up close, they are even more impressive, broad at the base, tapering gently as they climb toward the ceiling. Their surfaces are not harshly polished, but softly smoothed, bearing faint chisel marks that catch the light in shallow grooves. Between them, open spaces lead to smaller rooms where lamplight glows like captured dusk. High above, the ceiling feels almost like the underside of a quiet sky. Wooden beams span the hall, darkened by time and smoke from long-ago lamps. Between them, the pale plaster is washed with daylight that filters down through clerestory openings, never bright enough to glare, always gentle enough for tired eyes. You notice how deliberately everything is arranged. Benches stand where the light falls best onto reading tables. Shelves hug the walls and form low islands in the center of the hall, their heights chosen so that a person can reach the upper tiers without straining. Nothing is too tall or overbearing. Even the architecture seems to whisper, "Be comfortable while you think." The scent of the place becomes clearer as you walk. There is the dry, fibrous smell of papyrus reeds from the Nile marshes, pressed, flattened, and layered into sheets, then rolled into scrolls. You catch the faint metallic tang of iron and copper in inks, and the earthy note of soot and charcoal, carefully ground and mixed with water and gum. There is a trace of oil from lamps soaked into the stone over years of late nights and early mornings. It is not an overpowering smell, but a subtle blend that tells you, without words, that this building's true cargo is thought itself. You come to your first set of shelves. They are made of smooth wood, dark against the pale stone walls. Each shelf holds neat rows of scrolls laid horizontally, ends facing outward like a series of small, round faces. Some ends are capped with tiny wooden tags, others with bits of colored cord or painted marks to show what they contain. On one scroll, you see a small inscription near the edge Greek letters arranged in careful lines. The title is simple, a few words naming the work and perhaps its author. You imagine the catalogers who designed these systems, people like Callimachus, compiling vast lists, deciding where each text should live, how it should be found again among so many others. The library is not just a storehouse, it is a map of knowledge, and someone had to draw that map. You reach out and rest your fingertips lightly against one of the scrolls. The papyrus feels dry and firm, but not fragile. Layers pressed together give it a quiet strength, like thin pieces of time stacked one on top of another. You don't need to unroll it fully in your mind to sense what might be inside. Perhaps it is a treatise on geometry, lines and shapes sketched out in dark ink, the steps of proofs walking patiently from one idea to the next. Perhaps it is a poem, words arranged in measured rhythms meant to be spoken aloud in another age, to another audience. Perhaps it is a traveler's account, describing unfamiliar coasts and stars, winds and currents, the tastes of strange fruits on distant shores. You let the possibilities rest there, gentle and unresolved. Nearby, a low table waits beneath a shaft of softened light. You move toward it and imagine yourself sitting down, the stone bench cool under you, the table's surface smooth and inviting. This is where many days must have begun and ended for the scholars who came here, always the same gesture of placing a scroll down, unrolling it just enough, leaning forward into the small universe of its text. You picture one such scholar now. A man in a simple, belted garment, shoulders slightly rounded from years spent over tables. His hair is tied back loosely. His hands smell faintly of ink and wax. He unrolls a scroll across the table, weighing down the ends with smooth stones so the papyrus doesn't curl back on itself. His eyes move slowly along the lines, sometimes frowning in concentration, sometimes softening in quiet recognition when he encounters an idea that feels like an old friend. Across the hall, you notice other figures. A scribe sits at a smaller table, carefully copying a damaged text onto fresh papyrus, preserving its contents before the older scroll crumbles beyond use. His reed pen glides in small, steady strokes, the scratch almost inaudible against the backdrop of the hall's hush. A young student carries a bundle of scrolls from one alcove to another, arms wrapped around them as if they're fragile but beloved things. An older scholar walks slowly beneath the columns, hands clasped behind his back, lips moving as he tests a line of reasoning in quiet repetition. You realize that this place breathes not through noise, but through intention. Every movement here, the untying of a cord, the turning of a scroll, the shifting of a bench, is a small act of devotion to understanding. You rise from the imagined table and continue along the hall. On one wall, A series of niches holds texts grouped by subject. A cluster of works on mathematics treatises on number, proportion, and shape. Another section devoted to medicine, accounts of anatomy, herbal remedies, case histories from physicians who observed and recorded with careful eyes. Further on, shelves heavy with histories and geographies rolls describing battles, migrations, rivers, mountains, and cities both near and far. Each section has its own quiet flavor. Here, the crisp logic of proof and calculation. There, the tentative experimentation of early science. Elsewhere, the storytelling tone of historians and travelers weaving events into narratives that help minds make sense of time. You pause before a doorway that leads into a smaller chamber. Inside, the light is dimmer, filtered through a high opening that lets in just enough brightness for reading. The room is lined with yet more shelves, but here the scrolls seem older, their surfaces darker, their edges a little more worn. This might be a section for texts collected from earlier libraries, older archives, rescued from other cities, and brought here to join the growing constellation of knowledge. You step inside and feel the hush deepen. There is a sense of layered time in this room. Words written centuries apart rest side by side. Ideas from different cultures share the same air, the same dust motes, the same shafts of light. You imagine, for a moment, that every scroll is a doorway. Unrolling one is like stepping into another mind, another landscape, another set of questions. In this building, thousands of such doorways wait quietly to be opened, their hinges made of ink and memory instead of wood and metal. You don't need to choose one right now. Instead, you let the feeling of possibility settle into you. The library surrounds you like a vast, gentle sea of thought. You are just beginning your drift across its surface. As you turn back toward the main hall, you notice something you hadn't paid attention to before. The faint rhythm of footsteps and whispers here is not hurried. No one rushes from shelf to shelf. Questions are allowed to unfold slowly, like scrolls themselves. Answers, when they come, arrive not with lightning bolts, but with the steady glow of understanding dawning in a quiet mind. You step once more beneath the tall columns, feeling the cool stones steady under your feet. You have crossed the threshold of architecture and first impressions. Now, deeper within these halls, the lives and voices of the people who use this place are waiting. Scholars, explorers, mathematicians, poets, all of them once walked these same paths, leaving behind echoes that still linger in the air. You take a slow breath, letting it fill you as gradually as light fills a high window. Your night in the library is only beginning, and the next steps will carry you into the company of the minds that made this place legendary. You follow the quiet curve of the hall into another wing of the library, where the air feels just a little warmer from many long days of thinking. Here, the benches are grouped more closely together, as if the room itself expects conversations to bloom between them. You imagine arriving in this space at the busiest hour of an Alexandrian day. Scholars would be scattered across the room, some alone with their scrolls, others leaning toward one another in low discussion. The buzz would never be loud, but it would be steady, like the murmur of a sheltered shoreline where waves meet stone in soft succession. At one table, you picture a mathematician hunched over a diagram. Lines and circles are sketched on a wax tablet, a stylus resting between thoughtful fingers. He traces a triangle with the tip, lips moving silently as he follows the logic of an argument step by step. This could be a student of Euclid or Euclid himself, someone refining the language of geometry into something so clear that it will travel through centuries. Not far away, another figure sits with a different kind of question. On his table lies a map, more suggestion than precision, drawn from sailors' reports and travelers' memories. He compares it to a list of distances, the times it took ships to sail between ports, the angle of stars seen over different horizons. You might be watching Eratosthenes, or someone like him, quietly daring to measure the earth with nothing but shadows, numbers, and patience. Across the room, you imagine a woman seated near a window where the light falls most gently. Her presence is calm, her posture straight but relaxed, hands moving with habitual ease as she unrolls a text and makes careful notes in the margin. In your mind, she carries the spirit of Hypatia, or one of the many unnamed women who must have studied, taught, or copied texts in spaces like this, even if their names did not travel as far as their ideas. The conversations between these minds do not feel like clashes. They are more like overlapping ripples on the surface of a still pool. You picture two scholars standing near a shelf, a scroll half unrolled between them. One points to a line of text, eyebrow raised. The other answers with a small, tilted smile, offering a different interpretation. Their voices stay low, their words chosen carefully. No one here needs to win. They only need to understand a little more than they did yesterday. The library itself seems to encourage that kind of gentleness. The tall columns do not loom, they shelter. The benches do not isolate, they invite people to sit side by side. Even the echo in the room is soft, taking each word and giving it just enough space to be heard without overwhelming the air. You walk slowly along the edge of this imagined gathering, careful not to disturb it. On one table, you notice a set of instruments laid out with deliberate care. A simple armillary sphere, its rings representing the paths of heavenly bodies. A gnomon for measuring shadows. A small box of polished stones that serve as counters in calculations. You can almost feel the weight of each object in your hand, the smoothness from long use. At another table, there are no instruments at all, only words. A philosopher sits there, reading slowly, sometimes pausing with eyes closed, as if tasting a sentence a second time in silence. Questions about the nature of the soul, of virtue, of the good life, drift around him like faint incense. They are not meant to be solved tonight, or even in one lifetime. They simply deserve to be held and considered. You find yourself breathing a little more deeply as you watch these scenes unfold in your mind. There is something soothing in the thought of so many people dedicating their days to patient curiosity. No one here is racing a clock or refreshing a screen. They move at the pace of ink drying, of wax hardening, of understanding settling into place grain by grain. Along one wall, you notice a long desk where librarians work. They receive new scrolls brought in from ships and distant cities, texts from Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, perhaps even lands farther east. Each scroll is unrolled just enough to glimpse its subject, its style, its voice. A brief note is made, a place assigned, a category chosen. The scrolls are then guided gently into their new homes among related works, becoming part of a larger conversation that spans languages and generations. You picture one particular scroll arriving from a port crowded with voices you don't understand. Its script might be unfamiliar, its words a puzzle still waiting for the right mind to unlock them. For now, it joins the ranks of other mysterious texts, works that the library keeps safe, even when no one yet knows exactly how to read them. Knowledge, here, does not need to be immediately useful to be cherished. As you drift past the librarian's desk, you notice how the library balances order and possibility. Every scroll has a place, but every place can welcome something new. The catalogues are both anchors and invitations, showing what is known while leaving room at the edges for what is not yet understood. You pause near another grouping of tables. Here, a small cluster of scholars sits together, sharing a single text. One reads aloud in a measured voice, the words flowing like a quiet river through the room. The others listen, eyes half closed, occasionally nodding or shaking their heads very slightly. When the reader stops, a gentle debate begins, never sharp, never rushed, just careful questions and patient replies. You might be hearing early thoughts about the shape of the cosmos, or about the best way to govern a city, or about how to describe the movement of the Nile and the stars in the same breath. Whatever the topic, the tone remains the same, curious, respectful, unhurried. The vastness of the library's wisdom begins to reveal itself not only in the number of scrolls, but in the variety of voices gathered here. Different accents, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, all brought under the same roof by the shared desire to know a little more than before. You step back, letting the entire scene settle into a single image in your mind. A high hall of stone and wood, rows of shelves heavy with rolled papyrus, light drifting down through high openings, catching dust in slow spirals. Figures bent over tables, moving pens, turning scrolls, murmuring questions. The library not as a silent museum, but as a living organism, thinking through its scholars. As you turn toward a quieter corridor, you sense that the night is guiding you from the minds to the pages themselves. Beyond the next doorway waits a more intimate world, small rooms where single scrolls are laid out like treasures, where the secrets they hold feel especially close. You breathe in once more, letting the air of the great hall fill your lungs, then step toward that softer, narrower space where the scrolls will begin to open just for you. You follow the quieter corridor until the sounds of the great hall fade behind you like receding waves. Here, the ceiling lowers a little and the shelves feel closer, as if the library is drawing you nearer to its heart. A small reading room opens to your left. It is simple, just a few wooden tables, low stools, and lamps set in niches along the walls. The light is softer here, more golden than in the main hall, pooling gently on the tabletops where scrolls rest like sleeping serpents of papyrus. You step inside and let your fingers trail along the edge of one table. The wood is smooth from years of use, its grain worn to a quiet shine by the hands and elbows of countless readers. It feels like an invitation to sit, to slow down even more, to let a single text fill your world for a while. On the nearest table, a scroll lies half unrolled, as if someone has just stepped away and might return at any moment. You lean closer, not quite touching it, just letting your eyes follow the dark, regular lines of ink across its pale surface. The script is delicate but confident, each character shaped by a hand, that knew exactly how much pressure to give, how much ink to lift from the reed pen. In your imagination, this scroll might be a lost play, a piece of theater that once made an audience laugh or grieve in a language now faded from everyday use. You picture actors moving across a small stage, their gestures broad and clear, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of carefully chosen words. The story itself doesn't need to be fully known for its presence to feel real. Even as quiet ink on the page, it still carries echoes of applause and breathless silence between lines. On another table, a scroll is rolled tight and bound with a thin strip of cloth. You imagine it as a treatise on medicine notes about herbs, surgeries, fevers, and cures drawn from observation and experiment. Perhaps it describes a new way to set a broken bone, or a careful list of which plants soothe pain and which must never be misused. Within its narrow length lies the difference, for someone long ago, between suffering and healing. You move to a shelf where many scrolls rest together, stacked neatly in horizontal rows. Each one is slightly different in color and texture, some darker and more brittle, others pale and almost silky from finer papyrus. Small tags or notes might be tied to their ends, marking titles, subjects, or authors' names. You run your gaze along them slowly, as if reading a chorus of quiet voices waiting their turn to speak. One scroll might hold the thoughts of a distant philosopher writing about the nature of time. Another, a sailor's record of winds and currents along foreign coasts. Another, a poet's reflections on love, loss, and the brief brightness of human life under the unchanging stars. Taken together, they form a map of how the ancient world tried to make sense of itself. In the corner of the room, you imagine a scribe at work. They sit with a fresh sheet of papyrus stretched across a low board, ink in a shallow dish beside them. Their reed pen moves with a steady rhythm: dip, write, lift, breathe, dip again. The sound is barely audible, just the faint whisper of fiber against fiber. They are copying a text that arrived worn and fragile, its original fibers frayed by time and travel. Each line they trace is a small rescue. Without this careful work, the ideas held in that older scroll might crumble into dust and silence. With it, those ideas get another chance to cross centuries, to be read, debated, and reimagined. You notice how the scribe pauses now and then, not from tiredness, but to check each line against the original. Eyes move back and forth, comparing shapes, checking for missing words or stray marks. It is not glamorous work, but it is deeply faithful. In these quiet, repetitive gestures, the library extends its lifespan, one careful stroke at a time. On a nearby stand, you imagine another kind of scroll, a star catalogue, or an early astronomical text. Its lines do more than describe, they measure. Angles, positions, rising and setting times of familiar constellations traced against the seasons and the horizon. In such a scroll, the night sky becomes not just a blanket of mystery, but a precise, dependable clock for sailors, farmers, and priests alike. You picture the author of that text lying awake on a rooftop in Alexandria many years before, watching stars move in gentle arcs. Night after night, they noted which stars rose when, which vanished before dawn, which returned after long absences. Those observations, folded into sentences and numbers, traveled here into this library to be unfolded again by other eyes. As you drift further among the shelves, You think about how many lost works might once have rested here, songs no longer sung, histories told from angles we no longer have, philosophies that approached familiar questions in unfamiliar ways. Their physical forms may have vanished, but for this night they live again in your imagination, each scroll a doorway into a world that almost was, and might still be, in fragments we have yet to find. Near the end of one shelf, you picture a small cluster of scrolls written in a language you don't recognize at all. Their script loops and bends in ways that feel intriguing, not alien. Perhaps they came from a far harbor, carried by traders willing to exchange texts as well as goods. Their contents might have confused the first Alexandrian scholars who saw them, but the library kept them anyway, trusting that some future mind might unlock their meaning. This is one of the library's gentlest secrets, that it did not only preserve what was already understood, it also sheltered mysteries, untranslated languages, unresolved questions, half-finished ideas waiting for someone patient enough to pick up the thread and continue weaving. You pause in the center of the room and let all these possibilities surround you. Shelves full of carefully labeled texts, tables where single scrolls rest like quiet constellations of ink and thought, scribes who move slowly, preserving what they can, librarians who decide where each work will live, balancing order with the unknown. The fragility of all this becomes very clear. Papyrus is strong enough to last centuries if treated well, but delicate enough to surrender quickly to fire, damp, or neglect. A dropped lamp, a careless hand, a storm-driven leak in the roof, any of these could erase what one mind labored years to complete. Yet, instead of feeling anxious, you feel a kind of quiet gratitude. For a long time, this place existed at all. For a long time, people chose to protect and copy and organize these fragile objects, believing that ideas deserved shelter just as much as bodies did. You imagine someone centuries ago standing in this very kind of room, running their fingers lightly along a scroll they had just finished copying. They might have wondered, very briefly, who would read it next. Would it be a student tomorrow? A distant scholar in another lifetime? Would it travel beyond Alexandria, or remain here as a quiet heartbeat in this one place? Tonight, in your mind, you are that future reader. You are the one wandering among these shelves, feeling the weight of preserved thought without needing to decode every word. It is enough to know that such care once existed, that humans, long before you, loved knowledge enough to give it rooms and labels and guardians. As your thoughts slow, the details of individual scrolls begin to blur together. Titles soften. Authors' names drift to the edge of awareness. What remains is the overall sensation of being surrounded by countless minds, all gathered into these fragile cylinders of plant fiber and ink. You take one last slow look around the reading room. Lamps burning low, scrolls resting quietly on their shelves, a scribe finishing a line and gently placing their pen aside, a librarian closing a catalog tablet and setting it on a neat stack. Then you turn back toward the corridor, carrying with you the feeling that the library is not just a place of answers, but a sanctuary for questions, preserved in papyrus form. Ahead, somewhere deeper in the building, the night waits to show you one more side of Alexandria's great library, its connection to the living city outside, and the quiet fate that turned all this bright knowledge into legend. You follow the corridor again, your footsteps soft against the stone, as if you are trying not to disturb the thoughts resting here for the night. The air feels slightly cooler now, touched by a faint draft that suggests an opening ahead, a doorway leading back toward the living city outside. After a few gentle turns, you emerge into a wider space where the library breathes more openly. A row of tall windows looks out over Alexandria, their shutters partly open to the night. You step closer and rest your hands lightly on the stone ledge, letting your gaze travel outward. The city stretches before you in quiet layers. Faint lamplight flickers in courtyards and along streets. Shadows of colonnades, homes, and small temples overlap like soft brushstrokes. Farther off, the harbor glimmers with the last reflections of the Pharos lighthouse, its great beam sweeping slowly across the dark water. You imagine, down near the port, ships from many lands resting at their moorings. Their masts rise like bare trees against the sky. Crates and amphorae sit lashed in place, filled with grain, wine, oil, papyrus, spices, and sometimes scrolls. Texts brought from other cities so that, for a time, the library could read them, copy them, add them to its vast memory. Some of those ships have already been searched by officials and librarians. Someone opened a sealed chest and lifted out a bundle of tightly rolled papyri, their surfaces marked in unfamiliar handwriting. Those scrolls would have been carried carefully through the city streets, up the steps, and into this very building. For a while, their words joined the chorus of knowledge under this roof. You think of the people who lived in Alexandria beyond these walls. Merchants who knew the rhythm of the harbor better than the stars. Fishermen whose hands smelled of salt and rope rather than ink. Craftspeople shaping wood, glass, and metal into everyday tools and delicate ornaments. Many of them might never step inside the library, yet their lives intertwined with it in quiet ways through trade, taxes, and the simple need for good calendars, maps, and measurements. You let your eyes drift back from the city, glow to the windowsill in front of you. Here, someone once set down a scroll between two stone weights to keep it from curling in the breeze. Here, a scholar once paused to rest their eyes after hours of close reading, looking out at the same harbor lights and thinking about how small and vast the world felt at once. Behind you, the library's interior stretches in a series of layered rooms and halls. You imagine, for a moment, all the paths a single idea might travel inside this building. A line in a star catalogue inspires a new correction to the size of the earth. A passage in a medical scroll prompts a physician to attempt a kinder treatment. A fragment of poetry lingers in someone's mind and makes them gentler with a friend the next day. Knowledge here is not only stored, it is lived. It seeps out through conversations in shaded courtyards. It drifts from lecture halls into market squares. It rides on ships to other coasts, carried in memory as much as on papyrus. You lean your forehead softly against the cool stone by the window and close your eyes for a moment. Images rise and fall like slow waves. Shelves heavy with scrolls. Scholars murmuring over diagrams and tables. Scribes copying fading ink into new lines. Librarians sorting, listing, deciding where each piece belongs. Somewhere deep inside, a gentle understanding comes to you. This place was never just a building. It was a living memory. As fragile as papyrus, as resilient as curiosity, as changeable as the sea beyond the harbor. You know, of course, that in your own time people speak of the Library of Alexandria with a kind of wistful sorrow. They talk about fires, sieges, and lost knowledge. They imagine shelves collapsing into ash, scrolls curling in heat, years of thought rising into smoke. The exact details are debated, but the feeling is the same, a sense that something irreplaceable slipped out of the world. Standing here in this gentle night, you don't see flames. You don't hear shouting or crashing or destruction. Instead, you feel a quiet, steady truth. Even when buildings fall, not everything vanishes. Ideas travel in more than one form. Some scrolls were indeed destroyed over time, but others were copied and carried to different cities. Fragments survived, in quotations, inside newer works. Concepts echoed, changed names, shifted languages, and resurfaced centuries later in distant lands. The library's body may have been wounded, but its mind scattered like seeds on a wind that never quite stopped blowing. You imagine time moving forward from this calm night in slow, transparent layers. New rulers arriving. Old walls being repurposed, repaired, or left to crumble. Ships changing shape and flag. Languages transforming, then transforming again. People arguing, reminiscing, and eventually mythologizing this place you're standing in now. And somewhere in that long, drifting future, someone like you wonders, how much was lost? What did they know that we no longer do? What might the world have looked like if every scroll here had survived? Tonight, the library answers in a different way. Not with a list of titles or a catalog of missing works, but with a feeling of being held inside a place where knowledge mattered enough to be gathered carefully, a feeling of threads connecting you across time to people who squinted at small writing, sighed over stubborn problems, and stared out of these same windows in quiet wonder, a feeling that human curiosity is older and larger than any single building, city, or age. You open your eyes and look around the room one last time. The tall shelves, the soft lamps, the quiet aisles that seem to invite but never demand. You start to walk back along the corridor, retracing parts of your journey, past the cataloging tables where librarians once sorted new arrivals, past the reading rooms where scholars leaned close over tightly rolled papyrus, past the great hall with its high shelves and echoing hush, where minds from many lands shared a single roof. With each step, details grow softer at the edges, like ink seen through a thin veil. You no longer need to notice every arch and column. It is enough to feel that you have walked here once in imagination, in memory, in story. You reach a broad doorway where the night air presses in a little more firmly. Beyond it lies the outer courtyard, and beyond that, the sleeping city of Alexandria, and beyond even that, the long river of time that carries you gently back toward your own world. For a moment, you pause at the threshold. Behind you, the library seems to breathe out a long, quiet exhale of pages and thoughts and voices. Ahead of you, the night feels calm and wide, like a blank scroll waiting to be written on tomorrow. You step into the courtyard in your mind. The stone beneath your feet is cool and reassuring. A few trees rustle in a faint breeze, their leaves brushing softly against one another like the whisper of distant pages. The stars above seem brighter here, reflected in the polished surfaces of columns and in the still water of a small basin near the entrance. You find a quiet place to sit, perhaps on a low step near one of the pillars. You let your back rest against the stone. You feel the solidity of the building behind you, as if the library itself is lending you its strength for a little while. In your own life, far from Alexandria, there are questions that tug at the edges of your thoughts. Things you wish you understood better. Decisions you haven't fully made. Memories you're still trying to organize, like scrolls waiting for their proper shelf. For tonight, you don't have to solve any of them. You can simply sit here in this imagined courtyard and let the knowledge of another age surround you without needing to grasp every detail. You can let the Library of Alexandria become less a place of loss and more a symbol of care. Care for ideas, for questions, for the patient work of preserving and passing them on. You feel your shoulders drop a little more. Your jaw loosens. Your breath deepens and slows, like a reader closing a scroll at the end of a long, satisfying chapter. If you like, you can picture yourself lying down now on a simple woven mat in this courtyard. The stone wall at your back is warm from the day and cooling slowly. The sky above is framed by columns and branches, a patchwork of dark and star-pricked blue. Somewhere deeper inside the library, a last lamp is being gently extinguished for the night. You are not locked in. You are simply resting in the doorway between ages, half in your own world, half in this legendary place that exists now mostly in memory and imagination. You breathe in, as if drawing in the faint scent of papyrus, ink, and cool stone. You breathe out, as if releasing the weight of things you don't need to hold right now. In, out, in, out. The library grows dim around you. Shelves fade into shadow. Titles and names become soft, blurred shapes. What remains is a gentle sense of connection to people who loved knowledge enough to build a home for it, and to your own capacity for curiosity and quiet wonder. You don't have to remember every detail of this walk. You don't have to hold the names of scholars or the layout of halls. You can let the story sink deeper, like ink settling into papyrus fibers, where it can rest without effort from you. Slowly, the sounds of Alexandria's night drift away. The murmur of distant waves against the harbor, the soft calls of late returning footsteps on stone, the faint rustle of leaves in the courtyard trees. In their place, you begin to hear the quieter sounds of your own space, your breathing, the stillness around you, the soft weight of whatever supports you as you lie or sit where you are. The library's door, in your mind, remains gently open behind you. You can return whenever you wish, on another night, to walk its halls again and explore different corners. There will always be another scroll to imagine, another room to wander, another quiet question to rest beside. For now, though, you've drifted far enough through time. Your body is ready for sleep. Your thoughts have softened, like lines on a page seen through half-closed eyes. You give yourself permission to let the library, the city, and the whole ancient world fade gently into the background, like a book carefully closed and placed back on its shelf at the end of the day. You are here, in your own time, safe, supported, and allowed to rest. The questions can wait. The stories can wait. Tonight, the greatest act of wisdom is simply to sleep. If thoughts rise again, let them drift past like tiny scraps of papyrus on a slow, calm river, carried onward without struggle. Each breath you take is another gentle step away from wakefulness and toward a deep, peaceful night. You don't need to do anything more now. Just breathe. Just rest. Let sleep find you as softly as lamplight fading in the halls of the Library of Alexandria, leaving behind only calm, quiet darkness and the sense that you, too, are safely shelved for the night.